There we go.
Awesome. So as far as like the types of powers, I thought it was really interesting how each different power can be employed in like different situations. And just looking at my own life, I know I've seen how I employ not necessarily the coercive power in like a bad way, but I've definitely seen how that can be used to get people to do what you need to do. But I think that looking at the power and understanding how to use it appropriately, I think is the big point that I took away from it was, yeah, there's different situations and different types of power, but you need to use it appropriately no matter what the power is. And I know there was the referral power, or the one that basically they have power because, yeah, that one. I actually had a boss that was like that, where he didn't really have the knowledge to be in the position that he was in, but because people liked him and because he had that image and the way he talked and the way he interacted with people, he actually ended up getting that power, which wasn't the best for the company, but it ended up, he used his power for not good things.
Oh.
So that's just my take.
In my work, we usually are kind of more based upon like the expert power, because we're always doing constant group things, and pretty much whatever leader comes up from it is somebody, it's kind of more based around their skills. So that's the one I like. We're kind of reflected more on.
What type of work is that?
I was going to ask, what is it you do?
I do like, it's at a couple different locations, but it's like a dog place. So we do training, and we work with rescues. And yeah, so we help pull dogs from shelters. So we work with like the Golden Retriever Rescue and certain places locally. And then we kind of also help transport and train them for free and give them a place to board. And we also work with like regular people who want to have their dog boarded and trained as well. So we have a few different places. So that's where ours kind of is.
Share that example, because as I was reading in the text about expert power, like initially I was thinking, you know, technical, computer, things like that. And I hadn't even that's awesome that you share that example, because it goes to show that it doesn't matter what the field is, there's expertise required. That's cool.
Yeah, well, especially because we have some people that aren't as technologically expert. And so a lot of the stuff that requires that is mostly what I fill in. Like I'm the one that can do meetings with people through Google Hangouts, and a lot of them have to teach them how to do that as well. And since we work with a lot of different networks, there's a lot of kind of networking through that way as well, just as well as with the animals. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of funny applying stuff like this for now in the place where I'm working at too, because there's so much going
on. Yeah, like for me, in my work, I deal a lot with informational power. I'm in sales, so a lot of just like knowing, or I have to like kind of like just like know the product that like I'm selling a lot, and be able to answer like the clients or customers like either their objections or like their questions about it. So like information really is like power, like in like the way that I use it. So and I've noticed like now that I've been doing it for more years now, it's kind of like in my field, like the more you know, the more like the more comfortable you can feel, and also I've noticed the more influence I could have with the people that I'm working with, because it like you kind of like have to know what you're talking about and stuff. But as far as like my boss and like Well, kind of have like I kind of have a boss. But I kind of have a boss, but kind of don't, um, because I work like off a straight commission. But so I mean, I still technically have a boss, and so that he would kind of be like that, you know, his position, his legitimate power that he has kind of over me. But I feel like he doesn't necessarily. I feel like I have a good boss, so he's able to use his power and just kind of like in a healthy way to like allow his organization to, you know, to work like effectively. So that's kind of like what I noticed from the reading, that, you know, I use that legitimate power more than the other ones.
I kind of have like that information too. I'm a jeweler, well, a sales associate, and I work in jewelry. So
Yeah.
you kind of have to know all these things, or people like won't trust you. And we have a goldsmith in our store who's been doing it for 39 plus years. And so it's always, well, where's Penny? I want to talk to Penny.
Yeah.
Well, I can give you the information too, but then that kind of goes into like a reward power, because we do our like our quarterly bonuses, and we have to, each of us have to meet like a weekly goal almost, but like it adds up monthly, and there's a lot that goes into it, and you're always looked at for that. And if you don't hit like your Pandora sales or your sales in general, or getting what is it called, loans or whatever with the financial stuff, there's like a bunch that go in it, or you just either lose your job, or you get set back, or you get reprimanded. But then we also have the legitimate power, which is our manager and the owners of the company. And not that my manager isn't great, because like how you're saying, like your boss is awesome, and that's how my boss is too. But he doesn't overuse his power. He actually gives us the ability to like create what we want to do with like our own power. So when I was reading this, I kind of see different sources of power throughout the business that I work in. But yeah, that's what I deal with.
For me, the most cost, or the most beneficial power type was reward power, and that was I go back to a boss that I had years back, and he was not only good for the company wasn't always good, but he always sold the company. It was always he gave you not so much a monetary reward as much of a reward as if you worked hard, if you were willing to be there and help him out no matter what, he would always make your life easier. He would give you days off when you need it. You wanted to work for this person, so the reward of working for him was greater than, any money. Really, but it did help that we got, it was like a point system. We could choose from the catalogs and go online. A lot of companies have that now. But he'd always, if you, not only would he, treat you well, but he'd also just throw some points in there, and it was basically like cash value. So it was just rewarding having that kind of system in place just for doing your job, the job that you're hired for. So for me, it worked well, but I could see how it would backfire, and that was one of the things about that type of power style, that it could be ineffective too if the reward wasn't substantial enough. So
I think you highlighted kind of what it talked about in the chapter, like knowing, part of being a good leader is knowing board power and when it's going to be most effective for your leaders or your followers, and what they really truly want, whether it's days off or a raise or stuff like that. So I think you really highlighted what the chapter talked about.
I think a lot of times leaders try to use money as the reward power only, and it's not. You'd think that that's what motivates people, but really we're motivated by so much more than that. Mm-hmm. So I like that you brought those examples up of how a leader used reward power in other ways, days off, time off, understanding that you're working hard and you're not just being a slacker if you need a day off. Mm-hmm. That's good. I think, as I looked over some of these and read through the chapter, I really resonated with how the chapter talked about the combined sources of power together were more effective, like using referent power and expert power, combined, or legitimate power with expert power. That the legitimate power gives you like the role, but your power is so much more effective if you've got some expertise and you know, that people like you as a role model. Like the more things you have in that aspect, the more significant your influence can be. And I've experienced that, excuse me, with the leaders that I've been a follower of. Like the ones that I want to work for are the ones who know what they're doing, who respect me, and I feel like value me, which is kind of that, obviously they know how to use the reward power to show me that. And then that I can respect them because they have integrity, and I could respect them as a role model. In the industry I work in right now, which is, I work for a sand and gravel and concrete company, and we do a lot of asphalt paving and construction work, and we are really, that whole expert power thing is very over us. Like we are at the whim and call of outside engineers. Like we can go in with a job and a plan and following them, but as soon as they come in with their expert power and say, no, you have to do this or you have to do that, we're kind of at their whim. Like we can't move forward without that. So I've seen that used negatively and positively in that instance, because some of them have power trips, and even though they've been proven wrong, they won't, like, it's a pride issue. And then I've seen it great, like been extremely helpful, and we've moved forward on a job so much more quickly and been more been more productive and all of that because they helped with their expert power. So I've seen that used significantly. And kind of I want to, like, the second half of the question that we're supposed to talk about is ways in which cultural difference can influence the way we interact with leaders and employ power. And I was thinking about that with regard to, you know, I've traveled a lot. I've done a lot of work in Uganda, and a lot of the countries outside of America that I've been to are very patriarchal. And that the way things happen is, you know, the man dictates what happens, whoever that man is who's in charge, and it's all based on legitimate power and coercive power. And it's interesting to me when I think about that in terms of how we are in America versus how they are there. And like, if I had to deal with one of their leaders as an American, which I have had to, having to understand where that comes from for them. I don't know if you guys have seen the movie The Whale Rider. It's an older movie, but it's a movie about the Maori people and about this young girl who is destined. It's kind of like Moana-ish almost. She's like destined to be the leader of her people, but because only the firstborn son could really take up that role, the grandfather who's the one who's in charge. This made me think of that cultural aspect of it. Really made me think of the different kinds of power and how culture can affect that. That this young girl is destined to be the leader, and yet she couldn't because of all of those other power things in line.
When it has a lot to do with how women are viewed in those cultures too.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's no, even now I start to see the shift here. I mean, we have so many people from overseas that weren't born here, and not that there's anything wrong with that, but there's a cultural slide. I mean, they're coming from countries where women are essentially beneath them, and to come into a workplace and then look at women as hiring them as anything more than that. I mean, I just don't see that.
Yes, absolutely.
I see it kind of getting, that's going to be a struggle. So
I think some of it comes from like their whole cultural perspective comes from having corrupt leaders, coercive power, and they've never lived in a world where that could be different until they get here. That makes, I don't know, I think that affects it too.
What makes it difficult is that, or what I see makes it difficult is that, say for instance, we're talking about people from different cultures here in America, and they still have these cultures of, a patriarchal, how they run their business or how they treat women. And the thing that is hard is that to them, it's not necessary. It's not really disrespectful or disrespecting for them, but for us, it's like, oh, wow. Like, how could you, treat somebody like that? And, and so it's kind of like, what do you do? Like, how do you kind of handle that? Like, do you call them out for something that is their culture and like they, grew up in it? It's like the way that they are, or is it like, hey, like, it's not okay to do that here in America, or like just just in general, so it's just, I don't know. Cause I kind of had, just this past week, I came across an example where I was, talking to one of my customers, and he was treating one of his employees who was new, and it was a woman, and she was new, so she wasn't really like experienced. He's been on the job for like 15 plus years, and he's Korean, and so he was like, oh, just let her handle it. She's a rookie. She'll find out like the hard way type of thing. And I was like, oh man, that's like not really right. Like, and so, so yeah, I was just kind of like, just taken back. Like, it totally clicked right away. It's like, okay, yeah, this is like a cultural thing for him. Like, yeah, a cultural and a generational thing also, because, I'm a millennial and he was probably like in his mid 50s or something like that. So I understand that also, so I don't know. That's just kind of like, it's kind of interesting how like these cultural crosses and even generational crosses, like, happen, and like when we're faced with them, it's like, oh, what do you do in this situation?
Yeah. Well, I think it's so important. I think that's why it's so important for us to not get stuck in our own ways when we're dealing with people from other cultures, but to try and understand their culture, because it's not until we understand where they're coming from that we can really speak into that situation to help it change.
Yeah, and I think it's also kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, if you say something, you're disrespecting their culture. If you don't,
absolutely.
Then you
have to understand
kind of
how to relate to them in order to gain the respect to make a difference in what they're doing.
I think you have to build relationships and kind of understand more of where they're coming from in order, like you said, in order to speak into the situation.
Yeah. Well, and I think sometimes too, like in that situation that Andrew was just talking about, if that man doesn't respect women the same way, then a woman's probably not going to be the person who can make a difference in that circumstance.
True.
Mm-hmm.
Not to buzz anyone's flow. I didn't know if it mattered if we were over or not, but we're at 18 minutes.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Have we all gone?
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
All right. Yeah. Well, that's good. Good for me. All right. Let me